The weight of her handwriting, a psychological thriller. Here is what Detective Ray Callahan knew for certain on the morning of November 3rd. Clare Voss was dead. She had been found at 6:14 a.m. by her building's maintenance worker, seated at her kitchen table, a cup of coffee still warm in front of her, her head resting on her left arm as though she had simply fallen asleep. Mid-morning. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no visible wounds. The medical examiner would later confirm she had been poisoned. Here is what Ray Callahan did not know on that morning, but would spend the next 11 days uncovering. He had been in love with Clare Voss for 4 years. And the man who killed her was someone Ray had trusted with his own life. That part, the last part, would be the thing that broke him. Not the death, not the poison, not even the betrayal. The thing that broke Ray Callahan was a letter, 11 pages. Her handwriting, written the night before she died, addressed to him. Part 1. The Dead Woman's Coffee. Ray Callahan arrived at Clare Voss's apartment at 7:52 a.m. with a coffee he hadn't touched and a feeling he couldn't name. He'd gotten the call at 6:40 a.m. Suspicious death, 4th floor, the Delancey building on West 83rd. Female, mid-30s, no apparent trauma. The call itself was routine. Detective gets pulled for suspicious deaths. That was the job. Ray had taken the call the way he took all calls. Coat, keys, car. It was only when dispatch said the name that something changed in his chest. Clare Voss. He'd known a Clare Voss. He still knew her, present tense, because the mind doesn't switch tenses that fast. He knew a Clare Voss who worked at the public defender's office, 3 blocks from his precinct, who brought terrible homemade cookies to the courthouse every December that everyone ate anyway, who had a laugh that arrived before she intended it to, sudden and unguarded like a door blown open by wind. He told himself it was probably a different Clare Voss. He told himself that until he saw the apartment number, 4C. The same number she'd texted him from 6 weeks ago when her heating broke, and she wanted to know if that was something she could report to the city or if she just had to suffer. He'd looked it up for her. He'd found the number for the housing authority and sent it along with a note that said, "Good luck. They're famously useless." She'd sent back a laughing emoji and a thumbs down, and that was the last text he'd gotten from her. He stood in the doorway of 4C and looked at Clare Voss seated at her kitchen table and understood, very completely, that she was dead. He did his job. He walked the perimeter of the apartment without touching anything. He noted the single coffee cup, the undisturbed table surface, the chair positioned as though she'd sat down normally rather than collapsed. He noted the window, closed and latched. He noted the front door, no damage to the lock. He noted the small pile of papers on the counter. Mail, mostly, a takeout menu, a handwritten list of things to do that she would now never do. He did not look at the list for long. The medical examiner arrived at 8:15 a.m. Sandra Okafor, who Ray had worked with for 6 years, who was exceptionally good at her job and exceptionally bad at small talk. She examined Clare with the careful precision of someone who understood that the dead deserved the same attention as the living. "No visible trauma," Sandra said. "Skin color is off. Lips have a slight bluish tinge." She looked up. "You see the capillary response? I saw it." "Possible poisoning. I'll know more in 12 hours, she paused. "You knew her." It wasn't a question. Sandra had the particular skill of reading people the way she read bodies, looking for what didn't fit. "Yes," Ray said. "Professionally." And personally, he kept his voice flat. "She was a public defender. We crossed paths on cases." Sandra nodded. She didn't ask the other question, the one Ray could feel her not asking. She was too professional for that. She just looked at him for a moment with an expression that was not quite sympathy but was adjacent to it, and then returned to her work. Ray stepped into the hallway. He pulled out his notepad. He wrote Clare Voss, 34, public defender, and then he stopped writing because his hand was doing something it hadn't done in years. It was shaking. He pressed it flat against the wall until it stopped. Then he went back inside and did his job. Part 2. The partner. Ray's partner was a man named Daniel Frost. They had worked together for 5 years, which in police partnership terms was the equivalent of a long marriage. You knew each other's silences, each other's habits, the specific way the other one held tension in their shoulders when something was wrong. Ray knew that Daniel tapped his left thumb when he was thinking. Daniel knew that Ray went very quiet when something mattered. Daniel arrived at the scene at 9:30 a.m., later than he should have been. He had the slightly polished look of someone who'd taken care with his appearance that morning. Pressed shirt, hair neat, which was not unusual for Daniel, who was the kind of man who took care with things. "Hell of a morning," he said, coming to stand beside Ray in the kitchen doorway. "Yay, poisoning, Sandra thinks. That is where she is leaning." Daniel looked at Claire's body with the professional distance that good detectives develop and that bad ones fake. His expression was appropriately grave. He shook his head slightly. "Young woman, what a thing." "You ever meet her?" Ray said. "She worked the public defender's office." Daniel thought about it. Maybe in passing. Why? Just establishing connections, right? Daniel clapped him once on the shoulder. "You look rough. You doing okay?" "Fine." "Because I can take point on this if..." "I said I am fine," Daniel nodded. He knew when not to push. That was one of the things Ray had always valued about him. They split the morning work. Ray took the building. Daniel took the victim's phone records and preliminary background. Standard division. They reconvened at the precinct at noon. Ray had spoken to 11 residents of the building. 3 had seen Claire in the past 48 hours. One neighbor, a retired teacher named Margaret Osei, had seen her in the elevator the evening before at approximately 7 p.m. Claire had seemed normal, Margaret said. A little preoccupied maybe, but she was often preoccupied. She was a busy woman. Was she alone? Ray asked. Margaret thought about it. She came up alone, but I think someone had been over earlier. I heard voices through the wall around 5. A man's voice, I think. Ray wrote that down. Could you hear anything they were saying? Number just the tone. They weren't arguing. It seemed pleasant. Ray looked at his notepad. A man, pleasant conversation. 5 p.m. the night before she died. He thought about the texts he hadn't sent. The coffee he'd suggested getting sometime and they'd never actually gotten. The way she'd called him Ray in a particular way, not the way colleagues said it. Flat and functional, but with a slight upturn at the end like a question she kept deciding not to ask. He closed his notepad. Daniel's report was thorough, as always. Phone records showed normal activity up until 9 p.m. the previous night. Calls, texts, nothing unusual. Last outgoing call was to a number registered to a law firm, Greer and Associates, her colleague Marcus Greer. Call lasted 4 minutes, and after 9 p.m., Ray said, nothing outgoing. One incoming at 10:23 a.m. that she didn't pick up. Daniel slid the report across the desk. Unknown number, we're tracing it. What about her apartment? Anything on the search? Clean. No signs of forced entry? No evidence of a struggle. Kitchen is interesting. 2 coffee cups rinsed in the sink, but only one on the table. Ray looked up. 2 cups. Someone was there and cleaned up after themselves. Daniel met his eyes. Careful. Or she cleaned up and they left before she sat down. Also possible. Daniel leaned back. We need to talk to the people in her life, colleagues, friends, anyone she was close to. I'll start with the law firm, Ray said. Daniel nodded. I'll take her personal contacts. She have family in the city. A sister, I have the name from the building super. Ray slid the contact sheet across. Eleanor Voss, lives in Park Slope. Daniel took it. He tucked it into his folder with the neat efficiency he brought to everything. After he left, Ray sat alone at his desk for a moment. He thought about the second coffee cup. He thought about the man's voice Margaret had heard at 5 p.m. And then, quietly, like something surfacing from deep water, he thought about the last time he'd been in Claire's apartment. 8 months ago, a Saturday afternoon, when he'd helped her move a bookshelf and they'd ended up sitting on the floor with takeout containers between them, talking for 3 hours about everything and nothing. She'd made coffee, 2 cups. She'd handed him his the way she handed him things, direct, no ceremony, but with a kind of care underneath it. He looked at his notepad. He wrote who was in the apartment at 5 p.m. Then beneath it, without meaning to, he wrote, "Why didn't she call me?" Part 3. Eleanor. Eleanor Voss was younger than Claire by 4 years and looked older by 10. The particular aging that comes not from time but from carrying things. She had Claire's bone structure, but not Claire's ease with it. She sat across from Ray in her Park Slope kitchen with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking and answered every question with the careful precision of someone who had decided that falling apart was something she would do later, alone, in private. "When did you last speak to her?" Ray asked. 3 days ago. Phone call, maybe 20 minutes. Eleanor paused. She was fine, normal. She was complaining about a case, a client she thought was getting a raw deal from the prosecution. A small, painful smile. She was always fighting for somebody. Did she mention anyone she was worried about? Any threats? Any conflict? Eleanor's hands tightened on the mug. Claire didn't scare easily. If someone had threatened her, she would have said something. What about her personal life? She seeing anyone? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. She'd been seeing someone on and off for about a year. She didn't talk about him much. She looked at Ray carefully. That wasn't like her. Claire talked about everything. The fact that she was quiet about this one, she stopped. What was his name? She never told me his full name. She called him D. Eleanor set the mug down. I always thought that was strange. A nickname, or an initial, like she was keeping him separate. Ray wrote it down. D. Can you describe him? Did you ever meet him? Once, briefly, outside a restaurant. She was with him when I ran into her maybe 6 months ago. Tall, dark hair, good-looking in that very put-together way. Eleanor frowned. He had very good manners, charming. The kind of charming that is. She stopped again. That is what? Practiced, she said finally. Like he'd learned it. Ray drove back to the precinct with the windows down despite the cold. He needed the air. His mind was running patterns. The second cup, the man at 5 p.m., the mysterious D, the careful cleanup. Someone had been with Claire the night she died. Someone who'd had coffee with her. Someone who'd left before she sat back down at the table and didn't get up again. He pulled into the parking garage and sat in the car for a moment with the engine off. Dark hair, practiced charm. He thought about Daniel Frost, who arrived late that morning looking pressed and neat. Who had offered to take point on the case. Who had handled Claire's contact sheet with his usual efficiency. He thought about it, and then he stopped thinking about it because it was insane. Daniel was his partner, his friend. A man he'd trusted for 5 years. He got out of the car. He went upstairs. He did his job. Part 4. The letter. The letter arrived on day 4. It came through the public defender's office, addressed to Detective Ray Callahan, New York PD, in Claire's small, careful handwriting, forwarded by a paralegal named Joe who'd found it sealed in Claire's desk drawer marked personal. Deliver only if. Joe had understood what that meant. Ray received it at his desk at 3:17 p.m. He looked at the envelope for a long time. Then he took it to the men's room, locked himself in a stall, and opened it. 11 pages, both sides of the paper, her handwriting small and dense. The handwriting of someone who had a great deal to say and not enough certainty about whether to say it. He read, "Ray, if you are reading this, then something went wrong and I was right to be scared. I want to start there. I was scared. I want you to know that because I am going to spend the next several pages being very precise and very careful. And I don't want you to think that precision means I wasn't frightened. I just think clearly when I am frightened. I always have. His name is Daniel Frost. Ray stopped reading. He read that sentence again. He sat down on the floor of the bathroom stall. Just sat because his legs made that decision before he did, and he read the sentence a third time. His name is Daniel Frost. He kept reading. We met 14 months ago at the Brennan case pre-trial. I was defense. He was consulting with the prosecution on procedure. We talked in the hallway. He was, I'll be honest, immediately compelling. The kind of man who makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room. I know what that technique is now. I didn't then. We started seeing each other 6 weeks later. I know I didn't tell you. I thought about telling you many times, but there was something about the way you looked at me sometimes, Ray. I don't know how to say this exactly. Like you were deciding something and I didn't want to complicate that decision with information that might not matter. I should have told you. 3 months in, I found something. He left his laptop open one night. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a charger and I saw his screen. It was a financial document. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. Money moving through accounts in ways that didn't correspond to a detective's salary. Significant money structured in the specific way you structure things when you don't want them found. I closed the laptop. I didn't say anything. I told myself I'd misread it. But I didn't misread it. Over the next 3 months I paid attention. I am a lawyer, Ray. Paying attention to detail is how I survive. And the details didn't add up. The apartment he owns in his ex-wife's name in New Jersey. The travel conferences, always paid in cash. The phone he keeps in his car that he has never once mentioned. I made notes. I documented everything I could without him knowing. Last month, one of my clients, a man named Adrian Cole, arrested on drug distribution charges, told me something during a consultation that he shouldn't have known. A specific detail about an ongoing NYPD investigation that wasn't public. When I pressed him on where he'd heard it, he stopped talking. But the way he stopped talking told me enough. Simone in the department was feeding information to people like Adrian Cole. I think that someone is Daniel Frost. I think he has been for years. I think he realized I was paying attention. Last week he came to my apartment. He was normal. Warm, attentive. He made coffee. We talked about nothing, but when he left, I sat at my table and I understood. He'd come to look at me, to assess me, to determine whether I was a problem. I am a problem, Ray. If something happens to me, look at the secondary phone. Look at the accounts. Look at Adrian Cole. He'll talk if you give him a reason. I should have come to you sooner. I know that. I was trying to gather enough that you could actually act on it. And by the time I had enough, I think I had waited too long. I trust you. I have trusted you since the first time I watched you work, which was a Wednesday in February 4 years ago, and you were interviewing a witness who was terrified, and you were so careful with her. You spoke to her like she was a person who mattered. That is a rare thing. Ray, you are a rare thing. Don't let him know you know. He is very good at reading people. Be careful, please. Claire. Ray sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. The letter sat in his hands, 11 pages. Her handwriting. The slight pressure variations where she'd pressed harder on certain words. Careful, trust, please. The words that carried weight. He had been in love with Clare Voss for 4 years, and she had known. And she had kept it at arm's length for reasons that made complete sense and no sense at all. And now she was dead. And Daniel Frost was at his desk 20 feet from this bathroom stall going through case files with his neat, efficient hands. Ray Callahan was not a man who cried. He hadn't cried in years. He was not going to start in a men's room stall holding a dead woman's letter. He folded the letter. He put it in his inside jacket pocket. He pressed his hand flat against it for a moment. The same way he'd pressed his hand against the wall that first morning to stop the shaking. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked back to his desk. Daniel looked up. "Anything useful? Working on it?" Ray said. "You pull anything from the trace on that unknown number?" Still waiting on the carrier. Daniel returned to his files. "Could be the end of the day, right?" Ray sat down. He opened his notepad. He wrote carefully, slowly, next steps. Beneath it he wrote nothing for a long moment. Then he wrote, Adrian Cole. Part 5. The investigation beneath the investigation. Ray spent the next 4 days working 2 cases simultaneously. The official case, Clare Voss, suspected poisoning, investigating leads, coordinating with Sandra Okafor on the tox results, interviewing colleagues, tracing the unknown number. The unofficial case, Daniel Frost. He did it carefully. Claire had told him to be careful, and he intended to honor at least that instruction. He ran the searches from a terminal that wasn't his usual workstation, a computer in an empty office on the 2nd floor that he started using for report writing. He pulled financial records through a contact at the DAS office, a woman named Patricia Lamb who owed him a favor and who understood without being told explicitly that this was quiet work. What he found took his breath away, not because it was complex, because it was simple. Daniel Frost was exceptionally intelligent, but intelligence over a long period of time breeds a specific kind of arrogance. The belief that you've been careful long enough to stop being careful. The accounts Patricia flagged were structured with early sophistication and recent laziness. The early transfers were clean, layered, nearly untraceable. The recent ones were sloppier, larger amounts. Shorter intervals. The pattern of a man who had started to feel permanent. The secondary phone was harder to find. Ray knew it existed. Claire had mentioned it in the car. He always parks in the garage, she'd written. Ray had spent 20 years learning how men hid things and how they revealed them. On day 6, he found the phone in a magnetic case beneath the front bumper of Daniel's personal car. He did not take it. He photographed it. He walked away. He pulled Adrian Cole's case file the same afternoon. Cole was 31, mid-level distribution, previous arrests, but no convictions. Currently held pending trial. Ray requested a consultation under the pretense of a related investigation. He met Cole in an interview room on a Wednesday afternoon with a guard outside and no recording running, which was technically against protocol and which Ray decided to accept the consequences of later. He put the letter on the table. Not Claire's letter, a page of it, the section that mentioned Cole's name. He watched Cole read it. Cole's face did something complicated. "She is the one who..." Cole stopped. "She is dead," Ray said. "Poisoned 4 days ago." Cole looked at the page for a long time. "I didn't know," he said. His voice was flat, which was sometimes the sound of truth and sometimes the sound of performance. Ray watched him carefully. "I didn't know she was going to." He stopped again. "Talk to me," Ray said. "Not as a cop. As a man who was trying to figure out what happened to someone who deserved better." Cole looked at him. People had a sense, Ray had always believed, for sincerity, some basic animal instinct that predated language. Cole sat with it for a moment. Then he talked. Daniel Frost, Cole confirmed, had been feeding operational information to 3 distribution networks for at least 4 years. In exchange for significant payment, routed through a property holding company in New Jersey. Cole had dealt with Frost through an intermediary but had seen him once. In person, at a parking garage in the Bronx. "He had a face you'd trust," Cole said. "He looked like a cop who gave a damn." "He knows she was onto him," Ray said. "I don't know for certain. But about 2 months ago my intermediary told me to be careful about the woman. The lawyer didn't name her. Just said she was asking questions and we should assume she was a problem." Ray's jaw tightened. "And you didn't think to..." "I didn't know what they were going to do," Cole said. "I thought it meant they'd cut her loose, stop talking near her." He looked at his hands. "I didn't know." Ray drove back to the precinct. He sat in his car in the garage for a long time. He thought about Daniel Frost upstairs at his desk. 5 years of partnership, covering each other's backs on calls. The night in the Bronx 2 years ago when a routine stop went sideways and Daniel had been the one standing at his shoulder without hesitation. The barbecues, the bad coffee at 3 a.m. in surveillance vehicles, the easy fluency of two people who'd learned each other completely. He thought about Claire, who had spent months gathering evidence while afraid, who had written 11 pages to a man she trusted because she believed in his decency, and who had put the letter in a desk drawer marked only if because she'd hoped she was wrong. She was not wrong. He thought, how do you do this to someone? And he understood. Finally, that was the wrong question. The right question was, who was Daniel Frost actually? Not the version Ray had known. The reliable partner, the careful man, the friend. The actual person underneath that performance, because Claire's letter had said it clearly, practiced charm, like he'd learned it. A man who had been constructing a version of himself for so long that the construction was all there was. No underneath, just the surface going all the way down. Ray got out of the car. He went upstairs. He sat at his desk. "Danny," he said. Daniel looked up. "You want to grab lunch? I need to talk through the Voss case. I am stuck on something." Daniel smiled. "Warm, easy?" "Yay, of course. Give me 10 minutes. Ray nodded. He looked at his notepad. He wrote Patricia Lamb. Dad's office, 2 p.m., full briefing. Then beneath it, internal affairs tonight. He closed the notepad. He had done his job. Part 6, the arrest. The arrest happened on a Thursday morning. Ray was not part of the arrest team. He had given everything to Patricia Lamb, the financial records, the phone location, Cole's statement, Claire's letter, and then he had stepped back because staying in the middle of it would compromise the prosecution, and because Patricia had looked at him with steady eyes and said, "You need to let us carry this." Ray, and he had understood she was right. He heard about it through channels. Daniel Frost had been brought in at 7:45 a.m. He'd been calm, apparently, cooperative in the way of a man who was already calculating. He'd asked for a lawyer immediately, which was the right instinct, and also the instinct of a man who had spent years watching other people get that instinct wrong. Ray was at his desk when it happened. He sat very still. Sandra called him at 9 a.m. with the tox results. Aconitine, she said, derived from monkshood, tasteless, fast-acting, very difficult to detect without specific screening. She paused. It would have been in the coffee. In the coffee. He sat there and thought about Daniel Frost making 2 cups of coffee in Claire's apartment. 2 cups, hospitable, attentive, the practiced warmth of a man who knew how to make people feel cared for, and in 1 cup something that would stop her heart at her own kitchen table quietly, in the dark. She'd had no idea what she was drinking. Ray pressed his hand flat on his desk. He sat like that for a while. Then he picked up his phone and called Eleanor Voss. "I wanted you to hear from me directly," he said when she answered. "We made an arrest this morning. The case is strong. He is not going to walk away from this." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Who was it?" he told her. Another silence, longer. "She knew him," Eleanor said finally. "Yes, she trusted him. She did." He paused. "She was also the reason we caught him. She documented everything, kept records, wrote down what she knew." He stopped. "She was very thorough." He heard Eleanor exhale, a long, controlled breath that was not quite crying and not quite not. "That sounds like her," she said. "It does." Part 7. After Ray took 3 days off, he didn't tell anyone why. He drove upstate, to a place in the Catskills he'd been to once years ago, where there was a cabin and a lake, and no particular reason to be anywhere or do anything. He brought the letter. He read it again on the first night, sitting on the cabin's porch with a glass of whiskey and the lake dark and still in front of him. He read it slowly, The way you read something you are trying to memorize. The way she wrote economical but not cold, precise but not distant, was so fully her that it was almost unbearable. I trust you. I have trusted you since the first time I watched you work. He thought about the Wednesday in February 4 years ago, the terrified witness, the interview he apparently hadn't known anyone was watching. He thought about all the coffees they hadn't gotten. He thought about the question she'd never asked. The one he'd heard in the slight upturn of her voice every time she said his name. He sat with all of that. On the second day he went for a long walk along the lake. The trees had lost most of their leaves and the light came through clean and cold. He walked for 2 hours without destination. He thought about Daniel Frost in a holding cell somewhere. Calm and calculating, already working the angles. He thought about Claire in her apartment, a warm cup of coffee in front of her, in the last quiet minutes of her life. He thought about trust, what it required. What it cost. He thought about the fact that Clare Voss had trusted 2 men completely. One had loved her in silence and done nothing with it. One had killed her. He stopped at the edge of the lake. The water was very still. He stayed there until the cold made his hands ache. On the third day he drove back to the city. The trial of Daniel Frost lasted 9 days. Ray testified on day 4. He was on the stand for 2 hours. He answered every question accurately and completely, and looked at Daniel Frost twice. Once when he entered the room, and once at the end of his testimony. Both times Daniel held his gaze with the practiced steadiness of a man who had made a career of being believed. Daniel was convicted on all counts. The jury took 4 hours. After the verdict, Ray sat in the courthouse hallway on a wooden bench while the building emptied around him. Patricia Lamb found him there and sat beside him without speaking for a while, which was the right thing to do. "You did good work," she said eventually. "Claire did the work," he said. "I just followed what she left." Patricia nodded. She stood, squeezed his shoulder once and walked away down the long corridor. Ray sat alone. He thought about the letter. He still had it, all 11 pages, folded in his inside jacket pocket the way he'd carried it since the day he'd read it in the bathroom stall. He would need to file it with the court eventually. He would need to let it go into evidence, into the record, into the permanent cold archive of a closed case. But not today. He reached into his pocket and pressed his hand flat against it. The paper was warm from being carried close to him for weeks. He sat there for a while longer. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out of the courthouse into the gray November light. The same gray November light that Claire would never see again, that the city made no adjustments for, that fell on the living and the absent alike without preference or apology. He walked. He was not sure where he was going. That was all right. He had the letter. He had what she'd left him. He had her handwriting pressed warm against his chest, her voice, her precision, her trust, her impossible last gift. He walked into the city. He carried her with him. And for the first time in 11 days, he did not press his hand against anything to stop the shaking. He let it end of the weight of her handwriting. Every story I bring you is about one thing underneath everything else. What people carry in silence. Ray carried his for 4 years. Claire carried hers for 11 pages. Maybe you are carrying something too. Think about that. And when you are ready for the next story, I'll be here.